It's now my pleasure to introduce our next session, a panel discussion on the state of technology. Please join me in welcoming our esteemed panel of industry experts. Michael Ridler, Nathan Horton, One Click Heating and Cooling, Abi Cantamanini, thank you, Efficiency Canada, and Darren Scott with Siemens.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I try.
Hey folks, good morning. My name is Abi, and we don't have any slides for you. This is going to be more of a fireside chat type of deal. And actually yesterday at the HRAI AGM, Joe, the new chair of HRAI, I don't know if he's in the audience, he had a breakout session. He had an actual fire projected on the screen, which I thought was a nice touch. We don't have that either. We are going to have to bring the fire.
You're going to need a new moderator.
I didn't get pizza either. I didn't get any Pick 2 pizza, so I'm a little disappointed.
Your hot takes will do. So, gentlemen, welcome to the Maritimes. We're not in Kansas anymore. This is you guys are come from away, as they say in these parts. I, on the other hand, I'm local to the Maritimes, having lived here for 7 months. So I can tell you.
Thank you.
Well, we're glad you didn't rub that in.
Pictou County pizza, no, I'll let the actual locals tell you about that. But, I've been living in the East Coast. I've spent time in every province on the East Coast for about 8 months now, 2 months in every province. And I can tell you that, and Brian alluded to this earlier, the Atlantic Canadians are killing it, with heat pumps. There's more heat pumps here than you can shake a stick at. And I've been in trucks with contractors here, some of them are in the room here today, who would tell you that they've been installing heat pumps for 2 generations, 3 generations. Their grandparents have been putting in heat pumps, right? So, and I actually have breaking news. This data just came out last night from Statistics Canada. So heat pumps in homes across Canada, in like 9% in Canada, 9% of homes heat with heat pumps, when you include mini splits in there as well. In Newfoundland, 1 out of 5 homes heat with heat pumps. PEI, 2 out of 5 homes. Nova Scotia, 1 out of 3, and in New Brunswick, where I am currently, almost half the homes heat with heat pumps. So folks here are very familiar with heat pumps, right? They've been doing this for many generations. From a technology perspective, from where your vantage point, is the next generation of heat pumps going to be much different than what folks here might be used to? Michael, maybe we'll start with you and then.
You just know I'm the heat pump nerd. I just want to say I'm really happy to be here. This is my first trip to the East Coast. Got to hang out with some friends, not Abby. To whichever contractor he was riding around with. I apologize, you probably got some callbacks now. I don't know about you, Nathan, but probably going to happen. Heat pumps are not new. I think that everybody on the East Coast probably understands that. Eastern Canada is the leader in heat pump technology. I can remember as a kid putting in a York heat pump with my dad. And spoiler, that was a long time ago now. And so heat pumps continue to evolve. And there's sort of 2 messages I'd want to leave on the table. And number 1 is that we need to understand that a heat pump is not just an air-to-air heat pump. There's a lot of different heat pumps that are available in the market space. And there's heat pumps that go back decades that, again, are not air-to-air heat pumps. We want to make sure whatever heat pump we're selecting, we're not just thinking about the consumer, but we're thinking about the impact of the grid. And so where we can go with that conversation is right now, air-to-air heat pumps are by far the most popular. They're very important, and they're going to have a meaningful impact for Canadians. But the reality is there's other technology right now that's available, specifically as was just covered in the last presentation around ground source heat pumps. So ground source heat pumps, their adoption is quite limited because of cost. But if you look at the impact of a ground source heat pump on the grid, for every 5-ton ground source heat pump you put in, you'll offset 3.75 kilowatts per hour. So if you look at what that means over 1,000 or 2,000 homes, you're talking about thousands of megawatt hours of energy that ends up getting saved. And then you've got other heat pumps, specifically hydronic heat pumps, that add to that. Hydronic heat pumps are very easy to install. They don't require a ground load like a ground source heat pump would, but they're able to maintain COPs in excess of 3 because we have the ability to control the emitter. On top of that, there's now air-to-air heat pumps that are coming into Eastern Canada. You guys are innovators and leaders on this that are utilizing phase change. So you can actually run your air-to-air heat pump off peak, take advantage of the grid resilience, store that energy, and then use it on peak. So really long way to go. That kind of the future is now when it comes to heat pumps. There's a lot of really cool things that are happening. And the bulk of it is actually happening right here in your backyard, which is what is exciting to come and see it.
Sure. From a technology standpoint, I guess we do a lot of air-to-air. So changing in technology there, we don't see it, but where we do see it is in the controls. So controls and how the actual systems are operated. Is that a little better? All right. Thought it was loud enough. Is the control aspect. So how the systems are actually operated, how we actually manage the power usage within the house. So load management, looking at smart panel technology, different ways to be able to adapt air-to-air systems in the home without actually having to do panel changes and upgrading infrastructure.
Yeah, that's a good comment. I would imagine that here, unlike in Ontario, you're not running your heat pumps, just air conditioners. Right, a dual fuel strategy is really important, but how many people here have actually been out to a job site where a heat pump's been installed and the dual fuel strategy is there isn't one? They've got the controls, they paid for it, it was never set up properly. So, the future of heat pumps is probably going to be tied more to controls than anything. I'm sure you can probably add something on controls for us.
Well, from a Siemens perspective, one of the challenges, I guess, is around the load management piece that Nathan mentioned, that a lot of homes have undersized panels. So it's difficult to add a heat pump if you don't have the power available or the space in the panel. And a panel upgrade is quite expensive. So in order to get around that issue, Siemens has a load manager. There's other load managers in the market that allow you to add any large load up to 60 amps. So it makes it easy and more cost effective to add the load manager and then add in the heat pump, EV charger, that sort of thing on the back end. And then it just allows it to turn on when there's power available. So it kind of overcomes that cost challenge that many homeowners would face. Yeah,
can I add something to that point? So I recently got an EV. It took me like 3 years because I wanted the best possible EV I could get. And so that was one of my fears, was like, okay, I got a heat pump in my house. My house was built in the 80s. I'm going to get an EV. What's that going to mean? Spoiler, I was just overthinking it. I ended up talking with one of my industry friends who has an EV and went, I don't know what you're worried about. Just plug it into the outlet. And I didn't even get a charger. I plug my car in, or my wife's car in, it charges, there's no panel upgrades. Like, obviously, depending on what level of charger you want and how much traveling you're doing, but don't assume that just because you're getting an EV and you happen to have a heat pump and it's going to be complicated, you may not need anything. And as you just alluded to, there's manufacturers like Siemens that make really easy controls that can integrate and make life easy.
Nathan, can you take the mic away from him for a little bit?
Yeah, I got you. To add one point on that, particularly in Nova Scotia, and we see it a lot in Ontario, there's specific areas that we can't even do panel changes in. So Ontario, we run into it a lot in social housing side. Even in Halifax here, there's neighborhoods we've gone to where, we put in the request to do a 200 amp service upgrade, and there isn't enough power at the street level. So we even can't move forward with electrification without starting to look at these type of controls and how we can mitigate that.
So let's stay on the subject of controls and load management and smart panels and things like that, because, Brian alluded to this earlier. We need to create a default pathway for heat pumps and also think about the benefits that they provide, not just to homeowners from comfort and for contractors, but also from the grid. So, from that perspective, when you look at the role that heat pumps can play, right, in our grid, and here in the Maritimes, I can tell you, folks in PEI will tell you that there are some days, and I see Scott sitting there, a couple of years ago when during was it in the winter, Scott, in Summerside they had blackouts for a couple of days, and there are concerns with people in the province, and that creates like a ceiling to how popular heat pumps can be, right? So when we want to think of breaking through that ceiling, we need to get to homes that maybe don't have a load management or maybe are on a low amp home. So remember, Darren, you and I were talking about this. So you have some estimates, right, or numbers on like how many panels, what the amperage in the homes is, and in the Maritimes?
Yeah, absolutely. So based on sort of the research I did, we found apparently approximately about 400,000 single-family homes in Nova Scotia, and about 35 to 50% of those, or 140 to 180,000 homes, have undersized panels. So that's a huge market potentially of homeowners that can't afford a panel upgrade, and then the heat pump on top of it. So you're going out there, you're selling your services, trying to get them to install a heat pump. They can't afford it. You go with a load manager, a much cheaper option allows them to overcome those challenges. And as Nathan alluded to, if there's not even more power available at the street, you don't even have that option for a panel upgrade. So the load management allows you to kind of move past all of that and install that large load.
So let's stick with that because you mentioned people can't afford it, and this is one of the things I picked up being on job sites and in trucks with contractors, particularly here in the Maritimes and the Atlantic provinces, is that it's like I remember this gentleman I was with, and it was like I was on an episode of CSI. He was like, Abhi, a perfect project lies in the overlap of means, motive, and opportunity. It's like an FBI thing, and it's like means is like your homeowner's budget, right? Like what they want to do. Motive is like what problems they're willing to solve, and opportunity is like what a home will let you do. And so you have to kind of scope out a project that kind of falls within the overlap of these three circles. And then the next step is you have to sell it to the homeowner. So, the last couple of days we've been here. Nathan, you and I have been here for 2 days. There's a word for people like you and I here in the Maritimes. They call us keeners.
He just won't leave it alone, will he?
Keeners being overzealous and enthusiastic people who are taking down notes, get their head in the game. So in the last couple of days, the one word that's been spoken over and over and over again is workforce. Like, do we have the workforce to meet the challenges of tomorrow? So the technology is here, right? Is the workforce ready not just to meet the technological challenges of the future, but also then to package these products and then sell them to homeowners?
No. I think that's a pretty easy answer across the board. We have workforce issues right across Canada. I don't think there's a province, a city, or a municipality that doesn't feel that. Nova Scotia being no different. We do have a branch here in Nova Scotia. One of the largest challenges we have is licensed refrigeration technicians. I'm sure that is almost everybody in the room. Nova Scotia, I think the last time I looked, had less than 600 registered Red Seal refrigeration techs. And a lot of them get eaten up when it comes to commercial and industrial side. So it's a massive challenge in getting people through the program and getting apprenticeships started and actually getting people working on it. The second part is when we look at electrification, traditional HVAC companies have been either fossil fuel and refrigeration as a backup. And when we look at heat pumps, it becomes electricians and refrigeration techs. So there's a new mixture of types of trades that we require to do it properly and understand it. So there's definitely a knowledge gap when it comes to even how to look at a panel, how to know if you do have enough power, and whether or not you have an electrician on staff or understand what we're looking at. So when we start having the conversations on load management, power management, battery backup systems, like our product portfolio has dramatically changed. It used to just be we're doing the heat pump, now we're looking at that full home electric. So our industry is shifting with the types of products we can bring into a home, but that also brings a massive dynamic where do we have the people? Not really. Each province has its own unique variables. For us, Nova Scotia, it's mostly refrigeration. I get into Ontario, it's very challenging getting a Red Seal electrician working. Again, we have a massive new construction, which is great, but that takes away from a lot of the people we have available to us when it comes to the retrofit space.
It's interesting. Abby knows this. We did our event last week. That's how long ago it felt. And as part of that, we invited a lot of students from the local trade programs. My son is third generation going into the skilled trades. And it's interesting when we talk about shortage, right? Because there's not a shortage of people that want to do the work, right? There's not a shortage of people that want to join the skilled trades. I think that messaging is being received loud and clear. I could be biased. It's like literally in my blood. But as I looked around the room on Friday at our event and the number of students that were there and the fact that every single one of them reached out and connected with somebody, the bottleneck is not at getting them into the school. It's getting them out of the school and getting them into the field and getting that real tangible hands-on knowledge. And I don't have an answer for that, but I'm sure that with all the people sitting here, there's going to be some great suggestions and ideas. And I think the key to the success is just not being quiet. being loud and proud about what the trades means to Canada, because we have a housing shortage, we have a workforce shortage, and both of those things are caused by poor decisions at some level that I'm not at. But I don't know how to move the needle on that, but there is not a lack of resources, there's not a lack of talent, there's not a lack of people wanting to do the work. We just have to figure out how to allow them to do it.
So let's stay with you, Michael. I want to pick up on that because you are a second generation HVAC business, but you also didn't go into your family business, right? So you bought another business that you worked in for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one underrated aspect of what HVAC sector can do, particularly what heat pumps can do, from my perspective, having, like I said earlier, gone on right along with contractors across the country, is that the pathway towards a middle-class family life where you can be a captain of your own destiny and own your own business, that actually just a pathway to a middle-class life is shrinking in Canada. It used to be that you could go work in your parents worked at a factory or there were lumber mills and you could count on that living in a place you call home, building strong ties with people in your community used to be a pathway for a lot more Canadians than it is today due to automation, things like that. So that pathway is shrinking. And skilled trades, particularly home trades, seems to be a pathway for not just people to stay in the family business, but also people who are new to business, owning businesses, and people coming into business. Heat pumps, I know there's a couple of people here in the audience. I've spoken to a few people who have come into this industry they have their own personal goals, earning more money, having more fun, or doing something on climate, owning a local business, being a leader in my community. And heat pumps seem to be an entry point for businesses like this, right? So given where technology is going in the future, for people who are new to the business, is it going to make things harder for them to get into this business, or is it?
No, I think that's a great question. I think that where we are right now, it's actually a lot easier to do our job. And anybody who disagrees, definitely pull me aside and push back. As Abby had noted, I started in my family's business. The joke that people make is I was born with a flashlight in my hand. That's code for instead of going to summer camp, I worked with my dad and rode around in a service truck. And honestly didn't really like it. My background was in HVAC and software engineering because my uncle worked at Bell. And so my dad and my uncle were doing the battle of what's he going to do when he grows up. Spoiler, I left. I was like, I'm not staying in the family business. I'm going to go do something else. Somehow ended up in distribution, and now I own a distribution company. So I think I failed at doing something else. But things are getting easier, right? Anybody who's been on tools for a long time will know this. The things that we had to do like 10, 15 years ago that we can do now with automation, and not even talking about AI is big. AI is coming into the industry and is being very disruptive. I've been using AI myself for the better part of 2.5 years, and it just makes me more efficient, allows me to do things quicker. But you're not going to replace Nathan or myself or anybody, maybe Abby, we could replace him with an AI moderator. But the reality is if you look around the room and go, okay, so who out here thinks that you're going to be replaced by AI? You all play an important role in the industry. And to Abby's point, there is a fear. I actually think about it because I left the family business. My son is not in my business. He works for me, but he's going to go and do his own thing just like I did. But the reality is there is an opportunity for people to build a meaningful career in the skilled trades. And the skilled trades can be you're out in the field. The skilled trades can be you work at Efficiency Nova Scotia or you work in specialty distribution like I do. It's an exciting time because technology is going to allow people to get better at that skilled trade faster, but you're not going to be replaced. And there's entire industries out there that the reality is that AI is replacing them because it's just the nature of it. Nathan?
The AI conversation. We've implemented AI technology in almost every facet of our business, from sales, marketing, CSR, and what you see is actual growth. We've seen a 30-40% increase in what we can do. So leveraging it from installation standpoint when it comes to training, automating those type of skill sets, sales, being able to give direct feedback back to agents from their calls, and really being able to monitor the data. There was a really great presentation yesterday on AI technology for business supply chain. And it's looking at you're replacing the person you're going to for analytics, but you're not replacing the person that needs to do the job. So you can dramatically increase what your output is and really how many people you need. It's almost quite the opposite. I had the same fear, are we going to start having to replace people? And what I found is the more AI automation and technology we were adding into the company, actually the more people we had to hire. That increase in productivity created better pathways and made things easier.
Let me pick up on that, Nathan. Nathan.
Oh. You got to give it back.
This is how we show affection in Ontario. But anyway, Nathan, the AI is a very interesting piece, and we had a couple of folks talk about AI yesterday. We had deep dive sessions on it. But what I'm also curious about, the other side of technology is also just the controls on these things, right? And what I've heard from contractors, and actually we had a presentation from manufacturers a couple of days ago, the Insiders session, and they were saying that increasing energy efficiency regulations is making equipment more and more sensitive to install quality, and that as you get more and more higher and higher CA ratings, equipment is a little bit more finicky, and you have to commission it properly and things like that. So in that context, the technology as it relates to heat pumps themselves, and AI is a very, very interesting conversation, but the future of heat pump technology, is that going to make it more difficult for existing businesses to stay in business, or for new people to come into the business? Where do you see this going?
I think it's really going to come down to the business willingness and adoption, wanting to get that type of technical training. A perfect example is the smart controllers we're using in Ontario right now on dual fuel systems. So these are taking temperature controls into consideration. We have to program these to actually have all of our peak time and data use within them. So when you're doing a dual fuel system, you actually have controls built in that will decide, okay, is it more prudent to use electrical right now? Is it better to use gas? So you have those technologies built in, but it's not as simple as you're putting a 2-wire thermostat on the wall. So there's definitely a learning curve that has to be done where you got to have the willingness to understand it and the willingness to learn it. Even setting up a standard Ecobee. We've seen this time and time again where you go in to look at an Ecobee setup and they're not set up for the heat strip, or they're not set up to the right temperature controls. So really understanding the technology, and I think a willingness to learn, is what's going to make that difference in the marketplace. We've seen it almost in any type of industry where people either take on the adoption and want to get with it, or they can fall behind. If you're considering that you don't want to move to new technologies, you don't want to learn new technologies, you're happy with the way things are, well, the marketplace continues to move forward, and that's when new people will come into the marketplace, or there will be an adoption that needs to take place, and that just comes, again, with willingness to understand and willingness to learn the new products on the market, which right now is coming at light speed. HVAC, and I've only been in it for 18 years, was pretty standardized for majority of that. And in the last 3-4 years, the technology advancement has been astronomical. Every 6 months, you can see a new product on the marketplace. You can see a new controller, a new adoption that you can look at. So it's moving very fast, and I think it's looking between the weeds, understanding what the products are that you need to learn, which are going to make your business better.
I think, sorry, to build on that, even from a global manufacturer, we're seeing taking a step back from the heat pumps to the panels and the breakers, all of that's becoming smarter as well. And there's more integration as well. It's not the heat pump standalone doing its thing and sort of the water heater or whatever else in the house doing their own thing. They're all becoming integrated. You add solar to the home, you got generator panels, it all has to work together. So everything is becoming more automated. We're coming out with a whole new set of automated products, breakers, panels, that sort of thing. So it's all going to require that more higher technology automation piece. So it's all building on that, and it's all going to work together, I think, a lot more seamlessly as well.
Yeah, I think the key thing to take from this, though, is that technology's evolved immensely. I can remember, summer camp, as I joked earlier, the method of learning was from a journeyman. That's it. There was if I knew somebody else I could go and ask, I could. Those days are gone, right? Opportunities like this, you can virtually connect with anybody, anywhere. You can get to a much higher level of knowledge much faster because of technology without even talking about AI. So I think that's where the advantage is the ability to get access to information is way stronger now, and just imagine what it's going to be like in a year from now. People should not be scared of technology, and I don't think anybody here is, and you certainly shouldn't be scared of heat pumps, because heat pump technology itself is evolving immensely. If you look at hydronic heat pumps, they're all monoblock now. If you look at ground source heat pumps, they're all factory charged and run. There's many heat pumps now that are being installed in North America. It's as easy as installing a refrigerator. I don't want to downplay the complexity of heat pumps and the importance of training and licensing, but if you've been in the industry for 25 years and you're transitioning into heat pumps, which I don't think is anybody in this room, I think you're probably all very comfortable with heat pumps or you wouldn't be here. I just think the key messaging is we shouldn't be scared of it.
So let's stick with that, because, yes, we shouldn't be scared about the technology itself, but there is an element of risk when you bring a new technology into a business that you've been doing for 2 or 3 generations, right? And I know that a lot of people in this room like tinkering, like learn by doing. And when you have to bring a new product or a new piece of technology or a new way of doing things into your business, I can see how I've heard from folks in the room that it comes with an element of risk. I don't want to downplay that either. So what opportunities exist, and I'm asking you this, Michael, because with your training facility in Ontario, what opportunities exist for folks in the room here, not just to learn about the technology, because you can do that, walking around in the booths and stuff like that, but like to actually like tinker with it, learn by doing, and mess around with it. Like, what advice do you have for people?
I think you covered it. It's just a lack of fear. Don't be afraid to ask tough questions. I always like to say whenever I'm doing a talk with a room full of people like you guys, there's no dumb questions, there's only dumb answers, right? And you get to navigate what that looks like. But the way that you get to find out, how the cookies are made, so to speak, is engage with people you may not normally engage with. To Abby's point, it's when new people come into our industry, it brings a lot. So one of the things that I like to do is I like to work with the colleges and universities. So in our particular case, we have a live fire lab that Abby is referring to, and he's been to it. And our live fire lab has a variety of different heat pumps installed in it, but we call it a lab because Western University's PhD students use it for research. Why do we do that? Because you bring a bunch of PhD students in, they're working with a monoblock heat pump tied to phase change, and they're figuring out new algorithms and new ideas. And when you have people come in with zero knowledge on HVAC, but are very bright in other ways, it really ups your game. So for me, I think the easiest way to evolve and get better at your job is talk to people you don't normally talk to. Don't be afraid to engage with somebody who may not be in the industry, but is working at something at the research level, and certainly engage with the policy people. Efficiency Nova Scotia, Efficiency One, in Ontario, the IASO, like connecting with these people and letting them know, like, hey, I, Nathan, can help you with X, or I, Mike, can help you with Y. They're going to open your eyes to things like I've learned. I didn't realize that depending on what heat pump I select, I can trim 20,000 megawatt hours off peak. I learned that by working with Enercan. And there's not a lot of people at my level that go, okay, I'm going to spend 2 days a month with Enercan, answering questions and seeing what I can learn from them. So I think it's just be curious and engage with the people that are new to the industry.
So hold on, Nathan. Let me actually pick up on what he said, and I'll pass it over to you. So, I'm just going to take quick stock here, okay? So it sounds like we're saying that the technology is, don't be scared of technology. It's changing, but folks in the room here have got it, right? They have some confidence, learn about new things, try a couple of things, ask right questions, get familiar with technology. Technology is not scary. Workforce, we're a little mixed on it just because of what you folks said. It's always been an issue. It's growing increasingly an issue, but there are opportunities to kind of bring new people into the industry, and there's opportunities for learning and training, hands-on doing. I know HRAI is working on closing that skill gap and stuff like that. So technology is here, and we feel good about it. Workforce is getting there, and we feel confident about it. What is holding us back from going full tilt at this next generation of heat pumps?
Ooh, that's a good one. We have this conversation almost every event I think we're at right now, and what's our major holdups? I'll give you an example. I think we were talking about this yesterday. In Nova Scotia right now, load managers, as much as we're CSA approved, aren't fully approved for installation. So we're trying to move that needle. And at the same time, and I'm sure a lot of the room can relate, I booked a service upgrade in Cape Breton. Well, service upgrade in Cape Breton right now, it took me 2.5 months to get booked in. So there was a massive gap on, we have customers that want to move forward, but are we actually able to install? So there's a legislative issue with new technology coming into the marketplace, getting it approved, getting it to move forward, and speeding up installations. So in other areas of the country, like Ontario, for instance, we don't do panel changes anymore. We use load management, we use software, we use different tech to be able to move things forward, and our install timelines went from a month, month and a half, depending on what we had to do in the house, to 2-3 days. So as we progress with the technology, the conversations keep happening. Utilities get more involved with these new products coming out. We'll see a faster implementation. We've already seen it kind of move forward a little bit. You know, when we first started in the East Coast, and I'll use Newfoundland or Nova Scotia as an example, depending on the area, we were 2, 3, 4 months to get a disconnect date on doing a service upgrade. Well, that slows it right down. And when you're swapping people off oil or fossil fuels that need to depend and think forward of, you know, my winter's coming, well, by the time you hit September, October, if we don't have panel changes in, you know, people are filling up their oil tanks. So what's that doing is it's just making that long-term customer even push further and further out. We've had customers in the Maritimes where you're 6 to 8 months out on install from sale date just based on that. So do they got to get their oil filled up? Do we need to make it through winter months? When are we going to get a disconnect date? Or we're doing the panel and then, you know, we're waiting till after winter to actually go finish the installation. So that gap in legislation and actually getting these this type of equipment approved in each individual market after we finally get it approved on the federal level, that's one of the largest holdups we have in the marketplace. And we see that as a massive gap in almost every area of Canada. Is all this new technology is there. It's not just about educating ourselves internally as the industry, but it's also educating, you know, the regulatory authorities, the utilities, and so on.
And sort of build on that from our side, it's we see challenges with updating the code. You involve new products, you're introducing new products, and the code's not necessarily caught up to what the technology wants to do. And then when you introduce those new products, sometimes the technicians go in to inspect it and certify it aren't always up to speed, and there's some challenges around that as well. So there's some education piece around that as well. So it's all just trying to keep up and keep everyone educated, I think, is some of the challenges we face.
Yeah, I think that you both nailed it. I would just summarize it with unintended consequences. Whenever you're doing anything, think about the unintended consequences. Like the greener homes rebate that Brian talked about earlier that's been done away with. You got to wonder, how was the decision made? And I'm not judging it, but you have to ask the question, how is that decision made and what are the unintended consequences? And if we can focus on the unintended consequences, the easiest way to get around that is to do what HRI is doing right now. They've got a perfect mix of contractors, distributors, policy people, manufacturers, all in the room. And this is an opportunity for people that are making policy decisions to actually ask the question of, hey, Nathan, I'm thinking about getting rid of this program. What are the unintended consequences? Because if we're in individual silos, that's where problems occur. And I know that everybody up here on this panel likes to be engaged with different industry stakeholders just to share, okay, well, this one decision, here's the unintended consequences that you're going to run into in 5 years. So unintended consequences would be the thing I'd say.
So let's stick with that, because I'm surprised that one thing that hasn't come up yet on this panel is policy. I know policy can be a 4-letter word sometimes, and with some contractors. But, you know, I mean, like Brian talked about this too, and folks talk about it too. A lot of times when contractors experience policy, they're mostly experiencing programs, like incentive programs for homeowners, or regulations, right? And both of them affect how they do business. You know, like you were saying, Michael, and like Brian was saying earlier, like when programs stop and start, and stop and start, it creates like a sugar rush with contractors, and they have to change their entire business model to meet the parameters of the program. And then when the program abruptly goes away, as it has happened time and time again, it creates like a sugar crash, like at 2 p.m., you know, like when you've had too many coffees, you just crash at 2 p.m. and want to take a nap. That's what happens to contractors' business models. So you have to be resilient in trying to navigate these programs and these incentives to homeowners. So that's, I mean, we all understand that in this room. But policy is more than just incentives or regulations. Policy is like how we make decisions around where it is that we want to go to. Like we set a lodestar. I mean, a policy could be that we want to support small business, small to medium business enterprises as all these rapid changes in technology and business, and with, like we were talking the last couple of days, with trade wars and tariffs and stuff like that, our policy as a province, as a country, is to protect small business. I mean, that could be a policy. So with that context, what is on your policy wish list?
Yeah, I think that's a good one because it was contractor focused. I felt like Nathan should weigh in, but I'll start and then let Nathan add his 5 cents. It's interesting because policy should be about Canadians, and I'm not saying it's not because I'm not at the policy table like you. I recently had a conversation about a technology that's really meaningful to the grid. I'm not going to get into the technology, but the comment that was given back to me was everybody is going to use this technology because it's good for Canadians. So specifically, it addresses grid stability and grid use. And it's a really easy way to reduce grid impact in every single home in Canada, and very few people are aware of it. And so I was meeting with a bunch of builders and engineers, and they said, people are going to use this technology because it's good for other Canadians. And my counter to that was, people still smoke to this day, and they know they're going to get cancer. Don't leave it to people to make the decisions. That's where policy is important. If we're going to have a policy, it's about adoption of technology. If it's good for Canadians, we should adopt that policy. And the interesting thing about anything tied to HVAC and policy is that if it's good for Canadians, it means it's good for you as an installer and everybody who works for you on your team. It's good for you as a manufacturer. Abby, you look good for a change, which is fantastic. And me as the distributor, it means that we're all connected within an ecosystem. Rebates is a weird one. I'm not a huge fan of just generally incentivizing things because bad things can happen. But I think that incentives that are driven by good policy, that has the right stakeholders at the table, perhaps a contractor, perhaps a manufacturer, a distributor, to say, okay, here's the unintended consequences of this rebate. Thinking of Ontario right now, right, of what's going to happen. Because there are rebates that should be made available to be very, very impactful on the grid, and they're not. So, long-winded answer.
You didn't leave me anything. I think if I had a wish list on it, it's a little bit more uniform on policy across the board. You mentioned Ontario, and I was a big outspoken critic of the Ontario rebate program, and I was an outspoken critic for a few reasons. One of them was a grant being created based on tonnage, which the unintended consequence is people undersize or oversize equipment. We saw it under Greener Homes grant, where there wasn't any validation point to make sure systems were sized correctly, and 67% of all units under Greener Homes grant were undersized. Now Ontario is seeing the opposite, where units are oversized. Nova Scotia, I think, is one of the only programs in the province that has a mandatory F280 calculation tied into their home warming program. I scream that from the top of my lungs to BC, Ontario, and every other province. Like, we need this. We need mandatory sizing requirements. We need to give validation, and we got to make sure that there's 100 new companies that spring up anytime there's a rebate program that aren't doing it the right way, that are going in and undersizing equipment. So I think uniform policy across the board. If we're going to be doing grants, we're going to be doing rebates, we're going to do these type of incentivizations, let's make sure there's uniform across to ensure compliance, things are being done right, things are being sized correctly. Yeah.
I agree with Nathan and Michael.
The only well, we get on the Ontario bandwagon here, but the only thing that I would add to that comment is the whole point of the incentives was to drive heat pump adoption to be good for the grid. And the reality is the most energy efficient heat pump option available was not even part of that rebate program, which just makes my head scratch. It comes down, again, the unintended consequences of putting together a policy that they're trying to move forward that's supposed to be impactful and good for the grid. And we've just carved out air-to-air heat pump as the solution. And I continue to advocate for air-to-air heat pumps 100% are a solution, but we need to start referring to them, as Brian did in his keynote, as heat pumps. There's air-to-air, there's air-to-water, there's ground source. It's not just one trick pony. Just like as a tech in the field, you're not just bringing a Robinson screwdriver with you. We need to make sure we have the right tool for the job.
I want to, Michael, you're over inflating my importance. I'm not at any policy tables.
It's all your fault.
They put me at the kids' table at Thanksgiving because
At least 3, you need to take them aside later and be like, it's all your fault.
as a researcher, like my role at Efficiency Canada is to come up with ideas and work with contractors to understand what life looks like from their perspective and connect that with existing policy pathways and things like that. But the policy table, if there were such a thing, that's actually one of the things that HRAI is advocating for. And I took down notes as a fellow keener. I took down notes the last couple of days from the AGM. And so HRAI has a policy wish list. And so, Martin, I'm sorry if I'm not getting the details right, because sometimes I can't read my own handwriting. But roughly, there's like 4 asks, roughly speaking. So this is kind of, some of it might be lost in translation. Talk to Martin afterwards to get the full picture. But like this is, I mean, I like this approach to policy making, thinking about the whole industry. Number one is to like safeguard HVACR in all the stuff that's happening across the border between the 2 countries and tariffs. Remembering that this is an essential service for Canadians and especially from a context of affordability, making sure that the products and the industry is protected from whatever spillover effects happen between the tariffs. Second thing is like we need a workforce strategy for this sector, long-term, short-term, mid-term, a glide path to bringing more people into the sector, getting them trained, getting them upskilled, stuff like that. Third is indoor environmental quality, not just air quality, but like having a standard in Canada for just indoor environmental quality in homes, and working with ASHRAE and trying to get the industry to be a part of leading that charge on making homes more healthy and comfortable. And I think the last one here is expand retrofit incentives and not just think about heat pumps as like incentivizing a piece of equipment, but thinking of it as a part of a larger ecosystem of upgrading buildings. I think these are the kind of like the ways in which policy can then create a rising tide that will hopefully like lift all ships. Do you have any reactions to what HRA is?
Yeah, I think it's a good comment, and we're going to turn it unintentionally into an infomercial here about HRAI, but that's a good point, right? The role that HRAI can play is they sort of cover everything I said before. Nathan's like, I can't add anything. You stole my thunder. I stole HRAI's thunder, I guess, unintentionally. If HRAI has a role to play, that they can bring together the right people into the room to engage in the discussions of here's the unintended consequences. Here's the consequences of having a rebate program that's focused on air-to-air heat pumps and you can't do ground source heat pumps. And understanding what a ground source heat pump does for the grid. And if the goal is the grid, then we should be focused on all heat pumps, not just one. And I think what's important is that, the people that are here today, to make sure that you're vocal and highly involved with HRAI and your local associations so that the voice gets heard. I will go to any association and talk with people freely and openly and listen to their side of the story, whether it's the gas company or the electrical utility. And sometimes people will make the comment jokingly of like, hey, Mike, you're the heat pump guy. Why are you talking to the gas utility? And my response is, well, I can stand on the sidewalk and throw stones at the window, or I can sit at the table and have an intelligent discussion. And, you can find allies and friends everywhere. But I think that, what HRAI is doing, especially here today, is important. There's some really impactful people here today that you can make a difference.
It's also hard to turn down free snacks, right? Is why you show up everywhere.
This is true. I do like free snacks. Nathan, do you like free snacks?
No, I was here for the wine. Don't really have much to add to that side. To the point with HRAI, take a look at the heat pump champions. So the program there, you got a really great group of people that are all kind of in the same mentality and trying to move forward on the industry, look at new technologies. So really being part of the conversation. And to Mike's point on the equipment side, we've seen it right across the country. Air to air is accepted, but nothing else is. Me and Mike have had multiple conversations the last few years on air-to-water systems because I think it's an amazing system. If you're looking at replacing a boiler right now, most people, if you're looking at a boiler replacement off oil, because of how the programs are incentivized, you're putting in an air-to-air multi-zone and you're throwing in baseboard heaters. Where in other cases, we could do it in an air-water system, but there's no incentives for it. Nova Scotia, the only product approved, I think, is electric boilers. So we can do an electric boiler here under grant programs, but I can't put an air-to-water system in. So I think it goes back to one of our earlier conversations where that knowledge gap in technology, what's available, and then getting with the stakeholders. So, like Mike, I spend a lot of time with IESO, Hemorrhage Gas, a lot of the utilities across the country, and it's advocating for new products, new developments, really getting that information out there to hopefully you get it in the hands of the decision makers that can start making the policy changes to move some of this equipment forward.
So let's go ahead, Mike.
I just want to add one thing, because that's something Nathan and I were talking about at our event last week in Guelph. That's a great example of unintended consequences, right? There's no fault there. There's nobody went out of their way to do something wrong. Doing an electric boiler instead of a gas boiler, the whole point is to be cleaner, be greener. And that is a good choice. But the reality is that an air-to-water heat pump has a COP of 3.1. They have full AHRI data, they're fully certified, they can be installed. And if you were in Europe talking about heat pumps and said air to air, you'd get a look like you're a space alien of what's an air to air, because it is all air to waters. That's a classic example of unintended consequences, right? The air to water is definitely more money than the electric boiler, probably a factor of 3 to 1 if I had to guess off the top of my head. But the grid impact of something that's 310% efficient versus something that's 100% efficient, that is just a classic example of unintended consequences. And I think that's where events like this are important, because people are going to have these discussions in the room. I know I'm going to leave with new data points, and I'm sure others will as well.
It's sort of to build on Nathan's point about sharing information. As a manufacturer, it's very important for us to get feedback. Nathan's provided us with some feedback about how our equipment works with his equipment, and it's valuable for us because then we can improve our products that work better for you guys and make your lives easier. So that's valuable information to share with us as well. So all that sharing of knowledge goes a long way.
So our clock here says we've got 9 minutes, but we could do everyone a favor by giving people some time back and bring us back on time with the agenda. So let's do some closing thoughts, and Darren, we'll start with you and we'll work our way through here. So as I look around the room, I see, there's contractors, there's policymakers, there's people, who design programs, and there's researchers. It's a very diverse room as far as that goes. So two things. One is, I thought we would have a slide with our faces and contact information or affiliation contact information on it. It's not on there now. So we're doing this a little backwards, but bear with me. So A, where can people find you? And then B, any advice you have for folks in the room for how they can make best use of their day and their time here today?
So for me, it's kind of funny. There's actually 2 Darren Scotts at Siemens Canada, so I'd say go to LinkedIn, but you have to look for me, not the other one. But if you do send it to him, he will find it. But if you call in, Siemens has a 1-800 number as well. You call in, ask for me, they'd find me pretty easy. And for the day, I think just to everyone's point, just talk to everybody else, get to know as many people as possible and find people that do something slightly different than you and learn from that. I think is the best advice.
So I'm Michael Ridler. You can find me on LinkedIn. I also write for Plumbing and HVAC magazine. Leah has reminded me twice I owe her an article. She'll get it 5 minutes before it's due. Sort of my slides later, Martin. True story. I think the key thing that I would just say is sort of think about unintended consequences. And if you're a nerd like me and like data, I'd encourage you to go and download the latest Navius report that came out and talked about what our grid is going to look like in 2050, and just sort of connect that back to what unintended consequences can look like. There's a lot of really great manufacturers here that have technology that can have a massive impact on the grid, and to Nathan and mine's point earlier, they're not even being looked at for incentives or rebate programs. So think about the unintended consequences, but think of that from a positive standpoint. I'm not saying, unintended consequences, we made a mistake. Every challenge is an opportunity, and I would encourage you to look at everything that way.
Thank you. Nathan Horton, you can find me on LinkedIn. If I had to give some advice, it's be the advocate. Get with the industry, have the conversations, talk to your wholesalers, and learn. I consistently talk about a lack of education in the industry, and it's the education across the board, whether or not it's policy, government or contractor side, understanding the new technologies because of how fast it's coming. So be the advocate, get with your colleagues, get with wholesalers. I don't know a wholesaler in here that doesn't provide or want to offer training. We have an industry that likes to teach, and one that really needs to ask those questions to start learning. And get involved. I'll give another shout out to the Heat Pump Champions program with HRAI, which really collaboratively brings together a lot of the industry and a lot of the people that are trying to look at the new tech, look at how to move the industry forward. So get involved and ask questions.
Awesome. Well, thanks, gentlemen. My name is Abi, and you'll find me on LinkedIn, or I might just come knock on your door and ask if I could just go on a ride along with you.
Don't say yes to that.
Yeah. And Michael, how the tables turn. Michael is going on a road trip with me to PEI tomorrow. He's never been there.
I actually forgot about that before I made all these jokes about him.
He's not allowed to touch the radio or talk, which is going to be miserable for him. And me. So anyway, thanks, folks. That's a wrap from us.